Hopefully you can hear me. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm just making sure that everything's fine. As usual, we are experiencing some of the bugs. There we go. You can see me. Hello. Welcome to Flight Pass. My name is Simon, and we're continuing our story today about Waterloo. And this should hopefully be the end of the playlist. We are currently following Napoleon on his way back from Waterloo, having been chased off the battlefield. And if you remember what happened in the last few streams, we've arrived at a place called Avesnes, and this was one of these sort of forts, and this was an issue that the Allies had. There was no way that the actual Battle of the Waterloo would significantly would be the actual end of the campaign. There was still a lot of troops out there. There was Grouchy's troops, and it wasn't absolutely clear cut that everything had finished. Let me just sort out this. We're today going to do the pursuit to Paris, and the dates. I think we're probably talking most of June 1815. So I just leave that as June then. And then we can add on. It's just the rest of June, essentially. Okay. Let's continue. So we let's circle round here, and we should find this fortress. Now, Avesnes, remember, was one of the fortresses of several fortresses in northern France, and they were going to be an issue for the pursuit of Napoleon to Paris, because essentially each fortress on the way would have to be sieged or bypassed, but there would have to be soldiers remaining to ensure that their supply lines weren't cut. And so this is the town here, and eventually around about the 21st of June, the mortar's brought up here, and it happens to hit, luckily, one of the ammunition supply sections, and the whole fort blows up. And this fortress surrenders in the morning, and essentially provides a lot of ammunition to the Prussians for their advance into France itself. Okay, let's just get going. We're in the Huey. I thought I was going to get into a plane, because we're going to be flying back to Paris, but we've done the whole thing in the Huey, so let's continue our journey. And we've got the blue lines up here, which is our the route essentially that the French army takes in retreating back into France. So this stream today, we're going to essentially be doing a lot of flying along, looking at the countryside here, and we're basically going to wrap up this playlist, which has been on the essentially the 100 days, the campaign of Waterloo. We followed Napoleon all the way from Elba, and we're now following him back to Paris now. Now, so Wellington and Blucher are very much concerned at this time with what happened previously when the French were defeated in 1812 in Russia, and in Leipzig in 1813. Napoleon had managed to replace most of his equipment and instill a fighting spirit and patriotism back into his army, and he did this surprisingly quickly. And we've already discussed in this playlist, we discussed the Battle of Ligny, which was a defeat for the Prussians, and how quickly they managed to reorganize their army after that defeat, and essentially then be the pivotal provide the pivotal moment in the Battle of Waterloo to secure a victory. We seem to have a few issues here with the textures, but hopefully this will sort itself out as we proceed. So we're in the Huey. We've been in the Huey for the whole playlist, and this faithful helicopter has sent us all everywhere we could possibly go, following the campaign, and I hope you've all enjoyed it. It's been a blast. I've noticed I've been uploading some of these videos onto YouTube, and we've got essentially almost probably 100 hours worth of footage and material all about the Battle of Waterloo. So if you're into that sort of thing, please go back and check that out. And if you are watching in the future, you feel free to ask a question or put a comment below, or point out if there's any discrepancies or anything like that, and we can discuss them in the next stream. So we're talking here, we're around about the 20th of June, 1815. We're essentially now two days after the actual battle, and although the French army is retreating and Napoleon has found it very difficult to rally, he has told his army to go to a place called Leon, and we're going to be heading that way too. But he has left a lot of his artillery on the battlefield, but many of the horses and the gunners of those artillery pieces have escaped, and so there's a danger that essentially the guns would be replaced relatively quickly, and there's fortresses all the way back towards Paris that could provide new weapons to these artillery people. Now we've discussed the two armies. Blucher was very, very determined to press on into Paris. The Prussians had a lot of pent-up grievances with the French and where they behaved when they were occupying Prussia. Wellington was a little bit less eager. He was quite happy to allow the Prussians to advance. Wellington, being Wellington, always wanted to make sure that he was not straining his supply routes, and he always had a sort of air of caution about him. But they do decide to press on into France, heading towards Paris, even though they were the Austrian and the Russian armies would be available later on in the summer. They wanted to make sure that any advantage was pressed. And essentially what we get here is the French army falls back. Grouchy will fall back towards Leon, and the Prussians would essentially come along sort of on the eastern flank, so the more southerly sort of route towards Paris. And the British, the Allied, Anglo-Allied army on the Wellington would be probably a little bit behind. They would be more on the sort of northern flank, heading into Paris. In fact, let me just so we can just see where we currently are. Let me just quickly show you on the map. So this is where we currently are. We're here we've crossed the border down here and around about Maubeuge, and we've just flown from Vesnes. We're heading now down to a place called Vervins and Léon, and then we'll go to Soissons. But essentially, there's a fortress here at Cambrai, and there's all these a number of fortresses all the way to Paris, Cambrai, Peronne. You'll find them. You've got a place called Ham and Compagnie. You see these places here. This is all the sort of route here: Cambrai, Peronne, Compagnie. This is the sort of route that Wellington's army would take. They would then go to Senlis, which is here, and then to Paris via Argentière, sort of northern Paris, in this way there. The Prussian army would tend to be this sort of split into different corps, but the main thrust is kind of through the center. They would essentially go from Vesnes to a place called zoom in again. They're essentially coming through Saint-Quentin, La Fière, the forest of Compagnie and Noyon, and that sort of slightly sort of more central route. Okay, so let's continue. So many of these fortresses that we were talking about, they were actually bypassed. They wanted to press on to Paris, but each fortress did mean that there was a certain amount of troops had to be left behind. In terms of numbers, then, the worry was, of course, that an army could be reorganized. It's believed there's probably around about 70,000 troops that were in the National Guard. Now, we know that Napoleon races back to Paris at this time, and he eventually will abdicate in favor of his son. But because the French Chamber of Deputies is basically have no faith in him anymore. Napoleon will actually leave Paris at their insistence, but they still don't surrender to the Allies. Essentially, on the way here, we've got around about 100,000 Allied troops coming in. And essentially what happens is that the French don't really want to surrender to the Allies, and they kind of want to, the fortresses, for example, would prefer to surrender to the Bourbon king. And remember, he was a Ghent, and he will come across back into France and come to Cambrai around about this time. But essentially, there's not, apart from the sort of fortresses on the way, there's not much actual resistance. Grouchy has managed to extradite his part of his army, cross the border. But most of, apart from that, most of the Napoleon's army is shattered, as it were. Napoleon. So the actual sequence of events that Napoleon triggers is he gets back to Paris, and he has the option, and he knows that the chamber, essentially the sort of Chamber of Deputies is against him. Fouché has been plotting against him, and he has the options. He thinks he could dissolve the assembly. He thinks he could possibly impose martial law, attempt to rally the army, and fight once more against the Allied invasion. But essentially, I think his the realization sets in that he's done for. The Allies won't allow him to ever be emperor of France. There was probably little chance of any success, and essentially he is probably at this point quite a broken man. And so he will decide to abdicate in favor of his son. So on the way back to Paris, and we're just going to sort of mop up the sort of some of the ideas. Captain Mercer, remember Cavalier Mercer of the Royal Horse Artillery? He describes how he's moved to Nivelles after the battle. He's got no idea of the scale of the victory that has occurred at that time. When he gets to Nivelle, he's essentially still thinking that there's going to be French taking up defensive positions there or nearby. But when he gets to Nivelles, he discovers there's a festival of a celebration going on. There's quartermasters going around the town, essentially chalking on the doors all the people, the names of the people who will be billeted there, and prisoners are marched away, and the locals hurling abuse at them. Sergeant Wheeler, he writes home saying that the 3 days of the fighting is over, and he sort of describes how to them there was no distinction between the fighting, the Waterloo, the Ligny and Quatre Bras. To them it felt just like one battle. This is the town of Léon, and this is where initially, remember back at Quatre Bras on about 1 o'clock in the morning of the 19th, this is where Napoleon orders his army to retire to reorganize from this point. You can see the strength of this position, and it's you've got like an escarpment there, and this is an important military base for the French at the time. Let's just doing a circle around here. And remember, this is where Napoleon stayed. I believe it was on the night of the 13th of June, when he was on his way to Belgium. This is the place where he stayed the first night after leaving Paris. Let me see if I can find some extra information about Léon. Pause there and just check my notes. So the cause of D'Erlon and Rail reached here, and around about this is where Soult is now in charge, and he's now around about 20 to 25,000 men arrive here on the orders of the Emperor. The issue that they had at the time was that almost a third of the troops that did get here didn't have any weapons anymore, and there was hardly any artillery. They tried to restore some sort of order to the ranks at this point, and but the army was completely demoralized, and the numbers of desertions just increased. Local farmers in the area as well were refusing to hand over supplies. And Soult would write to Napoleon to inform him of the situation, and this is around about the 21st of June, and saying that they couldn't stay here, and they were having to withdraw. So 30 to 40,000 French troops withdrew from here, and they moved back to a place called Soissons. So we're going to continue our journey. So say goodbye to Leon. Okay, this is probably a good time to take a little break. So what I like to do is I should do these streams. They're never edited, so you can join in and say hello. And when I do, then we'll just do a quick break, and then this allows me to chop it up and put it onto YouTube in more manageable chunks. So we won't be going away long if you're watching live, and if you're watching on YouTube, we'll see you in the next episode as we continue our journey pursuing Napoleon and the French back to Paris after the Battle of Waterloo. Welcome to Flight Pass. My name is Simon, and we are continuing our playlist of Waterloo, and we've got to around about the 21st of June 1815, so it's about 3 days after the Battle of Waterloo, and we're pursuing the French back to Paris. We've just left the town of Léon behind us here, and we're just wrapping up this long playlist that we've been doing, following Napoleon all the way from Elba, and we're going to hopefully get back to Paris today, and we'll go and have a look at a couple of we'll look at the port of Rochefort, and we'll then go move over to St. Helena and have a look, fly around the island there. Hopefully we can get that done sort of today, and wrap up this whole playlist. Thanks for watching, by the way, everybody who's joined in. We've done over 100 hours on this subject, and I appreciate anybody who's been involved in the discussion. You can join me if you're watching back this on YouTube, or you'll find me on Twitch and live on YouTube most days, and we just chill out, flying around, looking at how distances, topography, slopes, all that sort of stuff affected the decisions of the day. It's for historians, well, not just military historians. We're going to do other subjects as well. For the people who always have a finger on the map page of a history book, if you like that sort of thing, you've got a bit of a nerd for the slope, as it were, then this is the streamcast, I think I like to call it, for you. And we are on Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. This, as you can see, has got photogrammic scenery and satellite imagery, so it allows us to actually get really detailed looks at the planet in the one-to-one recreation, and it gives you a really good understanding as well of how terrain and distances affected the history. With the Battle of Waterloo, for example, we get a very good understanding of the distances between the battlefields of, say, Quatre Bras and Ligny, and between Wavre and Waterloo, so we can get a sense of the achievement of these armies to do these campaigns, and how one of the things you never get on a book or a page, a history book, is that sense of how, actually how tiring it is to be on campaign for so long. Having to march 25 kilometers and then fight at the end of it, it's quite an achievement. So let's continue where we are. We're around about, as I said, we're heading towards Paris. The French army is being chased by the Prussians and the British, but there's a number of forts between the Belgian border and Paris, and each of these forts have to either be laid siege to, or asked to surrender, or bypassed. But the priority for the Prussians and the British is to try to essentially get to Paris before Napoleon can reorganize his army. Napoleon arrives in Paris. He ordered his army back to Leon. They couldn't stay at Leon, and then they're pulling back to a place called Soissons, so we're probably approaching Soissons soon. Napoleon rushes back to Paris because he's essentially got the French deputies plotting. Fouché, one of his ministers, is probably plotting against him, and he needs to get back to sort of assert his authority again. He's trying to, because obviously he's got fresh in his head what happened in 1814 when he was overthrown, when he was not at the centre of the sort of affairs. He believes he could have done a staged coup d'etat at this point. He probably had enough still loyal troops to do that. But he knows that the 100,000 troops that are pouring into France, chasing him now, would just swamp him at some in the near future. So he quickly realizes that his political position is basically untenable at this point. He was going to receive no support from the French politicians. They had grudgingly acquiesced to his rule in the first place, and he wasn't, I think, in a or never was in a mood for a civil war. And he knew as well that there was no way that the Allies' government would allow him to remain on the throne. Now, Napoleon, this is 1815, late 1815. He's very popular with the radical workers in Paris. But as I say, he's... I don't think he's he's lost a lot of his energy, and he's not in the mood for a civil war. I think he's ground down as well by the compromises that he's had to make since March in order to remain in power. And he wasn't prepared to take on a sort of a figurehead, as it were. And so he accepts the inevitable and abdicates, and he abdicates in favor of his young son. And so literally from the beginning of from the time he leaves Paris, which was around about the 12th of June 1815, he's back in Paris about 8 days later, and he has lost everything. But that's the sort of nature of the guy. He's always been, right away from coming from Elba, he's just been this whirlwind of energy and activity, just to and drive. But I think I think something snapped with him, possibly at the Battle of Ligny. The lethargy he experiences on the morning of the 17th. I think this showed that he basically had run out of energy. Now, most of these fortresses that we talk about, as we're flying back over this lovely forest area in France, northern France, and they would not surrender to the Allied army. But what Wellington did was he was bringing Louis the 18th back. And that meant that these fortresses would surrender to their sort of king, as it were. On the abdication of Napoleon, a provisional government is appointed under Fouché, and Fouché actually has been in correspondence essentially with Wellington, and actually sends out at this point details of the French army's positions. So there's inklings at this time as well that the French army is preparing to make little stands of resistances, and it's something that the provisional French government kind of encourages, because it essentially allows a stronger negotiated peace. And it does turn out that on the 24th of June 1815, the provisional government send out ask for Wellington and Blucher to grant an armistice We've got some weird textures again here. Hopefully this will pass. And but this request is refused. But Wellington does keep in contact with Fouché and at this time, and he informs him on the 29th of June of what it would be required for a ceasefire. I hope these textures doesn't mean that we're going to crash. Okay, let's just quickly pause here. Let's just check the map, see where we are. It would be nice to finish this little bit talking as we just enter Paris. Can't really see where we are there. Let's have a look at the map on the... Yeah, we got a long way to go yet, I think. Oh, we're not... Oh no, we're almost there. Yeah. Okay, we're almost there. So 4 days after Napoleon's abdication, so we're talking possibly 25th of June, Napoleon moves to a place called Malmaison, and I should have checked the map there. Let's find where Malmaison is. So Malmaison is on the west side of Paris. It's possibly just on the river. Here we go. So this is Malmaison here. So he's moved out of Paris towards the sort of western suburb, if they had suburbs in those days. He's got this sort of, I suppose it's like it happens to a lot of dictators or powerful people that when they lose their power, they're almost in denial. He moves to Malmaison. He comes up with these fantastic schemes when he's there. He actually writes to Fouché's government, and he offers himself as his services as a general to Fouché, which is, it's kind of how his brains are working at the time. And of course, this offer was rejected. But the agreement comes in basically that the French government's going to help Napoleon to try to depart France, possibly try to get him to the United States, and so they offer to protect him on a journey to the west coast of France, to the port of Roquefort. And we'll fly into Paris right now, and then we'll move over to Roquefort. We'll talk about the events there, and then we'll quickly move down to St. Helena. At the same time, this is the 25th of June. Wellington's as crossing into the French, crossing the border into France, and again, this is this whole sort of legalization sort of thing. He's very keen to. We've spoken about this before. To be diplomatically correct, and he talks about how his forces are essentially allies of the Bourbon monarchy, and how they're escorting the Bourbon king back to Paris. And so he had the King Louis marching slightly to the rear of his advancing armies, so he could argue that he's escorting the French king back to the throne. So whereas Wellington is trying to sort of give this air of a protector of the king, escorting the king back to Paris, the Prussians are much more acting like an occupying force, and trying to essentially get to Paris as quickly as possible, to act almost with acts of revenge. And this is something that the king, the Bourbon king, King Louis, actually protests at their behavior. When the king arrives at Cambrai on the 26th of June, he sends out a proclamation stating that all those who served under the emperor in the 100 Days would not be persecuted, except though for the instigators. And there was an acknowledgement by Louis the 18th's government that there was mistakes made during the first restoration. So it's interesting that he says apart from the instigators, and of course who's he talking about there? Well, he's talking about Ney, essentially. Sergeant Wheeler, he was of the 51st Light Infantry, and he witnesses this the king entering Cambrai on the 26th. He says we halted, and his pottle belly Majesty Louis XVIII marched into the loyal town of Cambrai. His Majesty was met by a deputation of his beloved subjects, who received their father and their king with tears of joy. Louis blubbered over them like a big girl for her bread and butter, called them his children, told them a long rigmarole of nonsense about France and his family, about his heart, how he had always remembered them in his prayers, and I don't know what. The presence of their good old fat king had a wonderful effect on their tender consciences. The air rent with their acclamations. The loyal and faithful soldiers of the great Napoleon followed their example and surrendered the citadel to their beloved master, old Bungie Louis. He carries on and says, no doubt the papers will inform you how Louis XVIII entered the loyal city of Cambrai, how his loyal subjects welcomed their beloved king, how the best monarchs wept over the sufferings of his beloved people, and how the citadel surrendered with acclamations of joy to the best of kings, and how his most Christian majesty effected all this without being accompanied by a single soldier. But the papers will not inform you that the 4th Division and the Brigade of Hanoverian Hussars were in readiness within half a mile of this faithful city, and if the loyal citizens had insulted their king, how it was very probably we should have bayoneted every Frenchman in the place. So the people well knew this, and this will account for the sudden change in their loyalty or allegiance from their idol Napoleon to an old bloated poltroon, the John Falstaff of France. So you kind of get the sort of sense that of what was happening here. Okay, that seems like a good place then again to take a quick break. And we will it'll be back in a couple of minutes. By the way, if you the music you hear is my music. It's the band's called E Praten, and it's capital E, capital P-I-R-A-T-E-N. If you like the music, it's free. You can download it from Bandcamp. I'm not asking for any emails or anything like that. It's totally free. You can leave a tip if you want, but go to Bandcamp and download it. And whilst you do that, I will get a glass of water, and I'll be back in a couple of minutes. Hello, welcome. Hello, guy at the back. Good to see you. Good to see everybody. My name is Simon. Welcome to Flight Past. We are flying in the Huey, and we are chasing Napoleon back to Paris after the Battle of Waterloo. And essentially, we got to the point where Napoleon has got back to Paris, and then he has decided that the game is up, and he's abdicated. We are in flying Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. So if you want to join me, you can. I'm on the West European West server. And the idea of this channel is that essentially I'm a big fan of history, and what I want to do is use this flight simulator with its satellite technology and its photogrammic imagery, and its one-to-one recreation of the Earth, to get down, napper the Earth, look at the terrain, look at the distances, look at the slopes, and how and get a better understanding of history. There's a nice chateau down there, look. And so we've done a series already on D-Day. We've now done the 100 days. We've followed Napoleon from Elba to Waterloo, and then now back to Paris, and we're going to just wrap this whole thing up here. We'll get to St. Helena, and we'll have a look at if we can find where his house was on St. Helena. And it's a slow process, this thing. I never edit these videos. It's always live. So if you want to go back and check out previous videos, you can. They're all on a playlist on YouTube. Go and check it out. Go to whichever one you want and pick it up. And if you ever need a question answered, or you want you think I've said something wrong, or you want to see something, then just leave a comment, and we can go and see that at some point. And it's designed, this channel is designed, we've been doing it for about 6 months now, and it's designed so that people can be part of the discussion of it. So here we go. This looks like Paris. So what day we got to around about the 26th. So King Louis has come back into France, and basically under the threat of Allied troops standing outside of Cambrai, the local population have accepted the king back. On the 29th of June 1815, Wellington informs the commissioners of the French government that there's a number of things that he would require to be seen for them to see a re-establishment of a French government, and he wants to see certain things that basically will provide peace. The best security, he says, for Europe was the restoration of the king and the establishment of any other government, that the kings in France must never lead to new and endless war. So he's basically saying, like, you're going to have to put in the King Louis again, because any other leader is essentially going to lead to either a civil war or another war. So here we are, we're back into Paris. So he Wellington has risen to say, you know, the simple and natural measure, it was basically for Bonaparte to go into be a prisoner and be placed out of the way. The king, Louis, to be recalled. And that the King Louis would have to be recalled without any conditions being imposed upon him. And that this should happen pretty much as quickly as possible. He rules out there would be any acceptance of Napoleon's son, Napoleon II. And he also rules out the Duke of Orleans. On the 29th of June, a deputation of 5 from the Chamber of Deputies here and the Chamber of Peers approached Wellington about putting a foreign prince on the throne of France. This again is rejected by Wellington. He declares that that Louis XVIII is the best way to preserve the integrity of France. Now you've got to remember, you see, it's you know, you've got the British government is a monarchy. You know, you can't, you know, be seen to just be changing kings or changing leaders. You know, they don't, you know, there's a rightful king, and you know, if you start making one rule for France, you know, it comes back and bites the British in the butt. Now, one of the biggest issues around this, though, was how easily King Louis had been deposed in the first Restoration. You know, we just did this. We just walked all the way up from Elba, and he just walked straight into Paris and knocked him out. And so there was an argument going on that there was a sufficient grounds to rule out a second Restoration. And at the end of the day, with the insistence of the British government that it had to be King Louis, the fact that essentially the British government was paying for this war, it meant that the British government would get their way. And on the 3rd of July, 1815, Paris formally capitulates. And the French barriers are occupied by British and Prussian armies around about the 6th of July. These barriers are essentially they're almost like toll gates for tax purposes. 7th of July, the armies actually enter the city. And on the 8th of July, Louis XVIII arrives. So he arrives back 111 days after he has fled. And Wellington reports that the occasion is remarkably quiet. I'm not sure whether that means quiet as in there was no disturbances, or is quiet this because the French population basically didn't want to cheer the king back in. And Louis essentially walks back into the palace of the Tuileries, which I think we can see if if we fly back this way, we should see it. The French army at this point as well had decided to withdraw behind the Loire, and Marshal Deval hoped to use it as a means to gain some concessions in the peace talks. And eventually, there's sporadic resistances for the rest of the year until finally the Treaty of Paris is signed in November. Okay, so let's. Where did we find? Let's stop here. What we're going to do is we're going to now fly over, go to a place called Roquefort, which is on the west coast, and I believe it's somewhere here. Here we go. So Napoleon had abdicated, and around about the 10th of July, he's being pressured basically by the French government to leave French soil. He couldn't delay anymore. Essentially, he would become a prisoner of the Bourbons, or worse, a prisoner of the Prussians, or even the Austrians. And the alternative was for him to surrender to the British. And in doing so, he would request a political asylum. We've come here to the port of Roquefort. The reason why we've come here, this is where Napoleon tries to get to. He tries to get here essentially because he wants to catch a boat and try to escape to the United States. But when he gets here, there's the ship, the Bellerophon. This is blockading this port. And on the 10th of July, Napoleon sends out two emissaries, General Anne Jean-Marie and the Comte de la Casse. They send out to meet a guy called, his name was Maitland, and he, they try to request that Napoleon be allowed to travel to the United States. Maitland is under the orders from the British government and the Royal Navy to prevent this, and instead he offers Napoleon he invites Napoleon to essentially come aboard the ship, and he will transport him to Britain. A few days of negotiations take place, but there's, at this point, the options for Napoleon are running out. And so it was on the 13th of July, 1815, that Napoleon decides to surrender. On this 13th of July, he writes a... thank you. There's someone who's just joined us. On the 13th of July, Napoleon writes a letter to the Prince Regent. And in this letter he says, in the face of the factions that divide my country... Stormtrooper, good to see you. So you can join me, you can see, you can do what Stormtrooper just did. I think he just crashed, did he? You can join me here. He's just below us there, look. You can join me on the European West server and be part of the stream. So yes, the letter reads, Your Royal Highness, in the face of the factions that divide my country and the enmity of the great powers of Europe, I have ended my political career, and I come, like Themistocles, to be with the British people. I place myself under the protection of its laws, with the permission of your Royal Highness, as the most powerful and most consistent and most generous of my enemies. So, on the 14th of July, Maitland, who's offshore here in the Bellerophon, he receives a letter informing him that Napoleon would come out in the morning to surrender. And it's on this same day that Deval makes a submission to the king, and this basically is a part of the Convention of Paris, which contains a clause which promises immunity to the citizens for past political behaviour. It didn't hinder the French government from prosecuting traitors, but it was it was essential that some people would be forgiven, but as Lord Liverpool said at the time, it was still essential that the new regime had to spill some blood for reparations, essentially for what happened. This meant that there was some people who were given exemptions to this immunity, and 57 people were essentially told that they weren't going to get this immunity. Now, Fouché, he was a bit of a royalist himself. He kind of agreed to it, but he ensured that the 57 people on the list were given ample time in order to evade their arrest. And so it ends up with the only person who, the only people who do essentially get executed for the actions were Marshal Ney and General Labedoyer and La Fayette. They are the ones who are arrested and tried, and they're all sentenced to death. Now, I did say that they were executed. They weren't all executed. There were Whigs in Britain who protested, and so La Valette did manage to escape, so it was only essentially Le Baudoyer and Ney. Now remember, I think Le Baudoyer was the guy who was in charge of the 5th Line Regiment that went over to Napoleon, remember, right at the beginning. And so he was essentially not followed his orders, and again with Ney, he was again had taken the army across to it. So those two were essentially the ones who took the chop, as it were. So and yes, and here's a quote. It says, "And so the intrepid Marshal Ney, the most heroic and probably the most popular of all marshals, died in the end at the hands of French soldiers." And so what we have now is the remaining question, and that is, what do the Allies now do with Napoleon? And the experience of 1814 and the exile to Elba warned the Allies against any leniency. Now, Blucher urged essentially that the emperor should be executed, but Wellington wouldn't have anything to do with this. So we're here at Le Port Le Rochefort on the 15th of July. Napoleon embarks aboard the brig, the Epervier, and on the early morning of the 15th, and he makes his way out into this bay below us. And to the Royal Navy ship, the Bellerophon. This is a 74-gun and the barge essentially pulls up, and Napoleon and General Henri Bertrand climb aboard. The Marines on the deck come to attention, and Napoleon walks to the quarterdeck. He takes off his hat to Maitland, and in French he announces, "I have come to throw myself on the protection of your prince and your laws." And Maitland bows in response. So with Napoleon surrendering on the Bellerophon here, essentially this marks the end of the Napoleonic Wars. And so, what is it that we're going to, the British are going to do with this valued prisoner? And we'll answer that in the next section. I'm going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll look at what the plans for Napoleon's punishment. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of the stream. I'll be back. We're streaming live, so I'll be back in a couple of minutes. Listen to the music, and if you like it, you can go to Bandcamp and download it for free. You just have to search for E Piraten, which is capital E, capital P, Iraten. So grab yourself some free music. There's about 5 albums now, I think, more. I can't remember now. We've been playing for so long. Go and grab that, and when we come back, we'll carry on. We'll finish this this story. So thanks for listening. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. Welcome back. Welcome to Fly Past. My name is Simon, and welcome to this. This is going to be the last section of our playlist on Waterloo. And I just like to thank you, everybody, for being here. And if you've managed to come all this way, hopefully you found it interesting. So we've been doing this now probably for a few months. I looked on YouTube. I've been breaking it down into episodes. I think it's almost 120 episodes. Each episode is about 20 odd minutes, maybe a little bit longer. So we're almost approaching about 100 hours of material on this one playlist. It's pretty crazy to think about it. But we have traveled all the way from this island here, Elba. We came all the way up to the Gulf of Yuan, moved across the Alps up to Paris. From Paris, then we moved up to the Belgium border, and then did the campaign of Waterloo, and then we've now come back and chased the French army to Paris. And now we've got to Rochefort here, and Napoleon has been exiled. Well, he's been surrendered. And so, what are the the British going to do with Napoleon. There's a number of things that they considered. One of them was to take him as a prisoner and detain him in Scotland. So that was one of the options that was considered. But that was one that Castlereagh suggested. But Lord Liverpool objected, proclaiming that there was too many legal problems for him to be incarcerated in Britain, and his presence on the British mainland would be too would cause too much public attention, essentially. So if they weren't going to try Napoleon or execute him like the Prussians wanted to do, even though the Prussians probably wouldn't even do a trial, the only option essentially was to exile him. And one of the things that had happened, one of the issues was the leniency, probably in 1814, of providing this Elba as a sort of a principality, or as it were, for Napoleon. It was essentially too near to mainland Europe. It's too prominent. It's too it's a thorn that is still literally sticking into the side of France, and something that could never be ignored. And so it's agreed then that if you're not going to imprison him in Britain, and you're not going to execute him, then he had to be exiled. And the option they came up with is the island of St. Helena. Now, is that it there? Let me see if I can find St. Helena. I don't want to get the wrong island at this stage. Now, St. Helena was actually one that was, I believe it was an option. Yeah, this is St. Helena here. It was an option that was being passed around essentially back in 1814, and it was possibly one of the reasons why actually Napoleon decides to leave Elba and go on this sort of crazy sort of escapade, because this was where they were planning to move him anyway. This is a British island. It's not associated with France. It's a long way away. There was it could have no impact on any efforts to establish. I mean, it's out of the way, and there's no possibility of an escape from this island. So let's have a look at this place. This is essentially Napoleon's prison cell. Before he actually gets here, by the way, the interesting fact is that the Bellerophon actually sails out from France and actually returns to Britain and actually arrives in Tor Bay. There's a lot of parodies at the time, if you remember these sort of Punch comics. So we talked about his letter that he wrote to the Prince Regent. There was a guy called George Cruikshank. He turns Napoleon's letter into a parody. He says, he goes, "Oh, good Mr. Bull, I wish you to know, although you are my greatest foe, that my career is at an end, and I wish you now to stand my friend. For though at the Battle of Waterloo I was by you beat black and blue, yet you see I wish to live with you, for I am sure what is said of your goodness is true, and now if in England you'll let me remain, I never will be guilty of bad tricks again." Let me just pause here. Let me just. I'm just going to try and see if I can find the location of Napoleon's house. Okay, so the place is called Longwood House. Which is a mansion. Trying to find out where that will be. We can go and have a look at it. There's also supposedly a gravestone here in the center of the island. Longwood House is essentially in the center of the island. Let's go and see if we can find that. What else do we need to talk about? Oh, well, let's talk about the Treaty of Paris then. The Treaty of Paris was officially signed 20th November 1815. It basically has returned a number of territories back to neighbouring countries. There's the strip of land between Charleroi, below Charleroi, is returned to Belgium. France is told to pay an indemnity of 29 million pounds, and told to restore all artwork. France also had to pay for the occupation of 150,000 troops, essentially in northern France, for around about 5 years. So this is quite a barren-looking island, isn't it? It's essentially St. Helena was kind of it's a British territory. It was essentially owned by East India Company, presumably as some sort of staging post for ships to pull into. Okay, we've got Blue Hill here. There's this looks like this is called Sandy Bay area. There's a beach and down here. So Longwood is this way, I think. Over this place up here is called Diana's Peak. And just beyond Diana's Peak is Napoleon's grave. So let's go and have a look at that. Yep, there's St. Paul's. This here is Diana's Peak. Wellington, by the way, essentially becomes the most powerful man in Europe. He's made a Prince of the Netherlands. He receives many honours. The British government essentially gives him about £200,000 from a grateful nation. And he was always sensitive to the French, essentially to the what the presence of the British troops was doing to the French. And so he would actually end the occupation early. Okay, we're getting these textures again. But you could argue that it's basically his common sense in this matter, as a commander-in-chief, would lay the foundations for a protracted period of peace between Britain and France. And the fact that Britain and France would become allies. All right, let's just come back round this way. We've got Jamestown on our right, and so somewhere in here. We're looking probably down below here. Let's just pause here and we can jump out. And essentially this place is called Longwood. I believe it's somewhere around here. There we go. So it's this building essentially here. This is it here. This is Longwood House. And so it's obviously center of the island, maybe hot down here, a bit cool up here. This is part of a farm. So it's this essentially was where Napoleon is exiled to on the he arrives here on the 10th of December 1815, and he will basically dies. He spends 6 years in this place. Dies on the 5th of May 1821. It was owned by the East Indian Company, and later actually was purchased by France, I think, and operates now as a museum. And then his grave, you know, I'm not sure if his body is still there, or it was just where he was. Maybe it was temporarily put there, but we're talking. Let's see. So, come down here along this ridge, essentially. And then there's a it's marked on the map as it being essentially somewhere here. somewhere about around here would be where his it says his grave is. Whether that's just a memorial to him, we don't know. Okay, let's just wrap this up. So this is where, by the way, Napoleon would write a lot about the battle. He would say things like the English infantry was firm and sound, and their cavalry could have done better. So he nails that. Wellington said that their losses were immense, but the British infantry, he said, I never saw the infantry behave so well. And Wellington would say later, and I think this is probably true, because the Napoleonic Wars was so long, 25 odd years of fighting, so much, the generations of people were used to war, and the Waterloo itself was such an iconic battle. It was one of these ones where you've got these two huge figures in Napoleon and Wellington meeting in sight of each other on a relatively small battlefield, and Wellington would say 19 years later, he said, Waterloo did more than any other battle I know of towards the true object of all battles, and that it was the peace of the world. And I think that's pretty cool. Thank you. Superark, thank you very much for the follow. So this is it then. This is the end of the playlist. We've managed to arrive at St. Helena. We've followed Napoleon all the way from Elba to Waterloo and back again. And it's been a bit of a journey. We will leave this here, and I'd like to thank everybody who's been taken part in this exercise. And we are a young channel, and I'm sure that if we continue building, this will be something that we could probably come back to and revisit again, and hopefully other people can join in. If you are watching later, even if it's a few years later, please write a comment in the comments below. If you think there's something you want to see or we've missed out, that would be great. If you think I've got something wrong, that would be cool, just to sort of we can revisit this at another time. But as I say, I looked at the YouTube hours. I think this playlist is almost 100 hours long. So I think we could probably say we've done the Battle of Waterloo and the campaign of Waterloo, the 100 days justice. And it's quite interesting that we are here in St. Helena in the South Atlantic, and the next playlist we're going to do is going to be the Falklands War, 1982. There's been a bit of talk about it due to some football matches, and so we're going to look at that conflict. I believe it's another very short conflict. It's was probably about 111 days. I think the Falklands War was around about 73 days. But we'll look into some of the key areas of that war. We will not be judging it in any way. We're coming at it as a purely looking at it in terms of distances and topography and slopes and what the conditions might have been like at the time. And so that will be the next playlist, and we will probably be doing that in a few days' time. Cool, there you go. So thank you very much. Thank you to all the people who have participated. As I say, if you want the free music, then all you've got to do is search for Iparaten, which is capital E, capital P-I-R-A-T-E-N. Go to Bandcamp and you'll be able to download any of my albums there. These are all the music you find at the end of these streams. If you are where you can support the channel, though, please like it, love it, heart it, subscribe it, all that sort of stuff. With the follower goal, I think Twitch was saying there was something about 80 being really important, and we're on 79 out of 80 now. So if we could just get that to 80, that would be really, really cool. And we will probably then have to stretch our goal and be a bit more ambitious, maybe. As you can see, though, I think on YouTube we're around about I think about 30 something, 38, 39, 40 people. So not many. Though, to be honest, if I was talking to 40 people, I would probably be nervous. Let me just check what that is. So we got a record. So at the end of the Waterloo playlist, we have got 38 subscribers on YouTube. So if you want to click that subscribe button, that'd be good. And we've got a friend over here who is flying. That's an F-18. So we look like we're about to be buzzed. Can't make out who that was. Islak, I think it was. Yeah, so that's cool. So someone else is down here at St. Helena in the middle of the South Atlantic. Cool. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.